rivalry at Wereline University. Wereline University stood as the pinnacle of military education, a fortress of knowledge where only the best and brightest of the land were admitted. Founded by the legendary Admiral Zuja, a commander whose strategies were studied across the globe, Wereline was more than a school. It was a crucible where future leaders of the world were forged. Its alumni included generals, admirals, and statesmen whose decisions shaped the fate of nations. The institution's prestige was unmatched, and admission into its hallowed halls was a testament to one's exceptional potential. Among the students who walked the corridors of Wereline, none were more esteemed than Kodo and Ruta. Both were prodigies in their own right, their talents evident from a young age. Kodo, the orphan boy adopted and trained by Natsu, had developed into a figure of calm strength and tactical brilliance. Ruta, the privileged son of Major General Hurus, had been groomed for greatness from birth, his sharp mind and martial prowess making him a formidable presence. They were the university's shining stars, admired by their peers and respected by their instructors. Yet, despite their shared brilliance, Kodo and Ruta were as different as day and night. Where Kodo was composed and introspective, Ruta was intense and assertive. Kodo's calm demeanor masked a mind constantly at work, analyzing every situation with a strategic eye. Ruta, on the other hand, was driven by ambition, a fierce desire to prove himself and surpass everyone, particularly Kodo, whom he saw as his only real competition. The rivalry between the two was well known among the students and faculty. It was not merely academic, it was deeply personal, stemming from the different paths their lives had taken and the contrasting ideals they embodied. Ruta, who had always been the best at everything, found it intolerable that Kodo, an orphan with no prestigious lineage, could match him in skill and intellect. But it wasn't just Kodo's capabilities that fueled Ruta's resentment. It was the way Kodo carried himself, calm, unflappable, seemingly untouched by the pressures that weighed so heavily on Ruta. Kodo's humility, his tendency to stay out of conflicts, only made Ruta's anger burn brighter. In Ruta's eyes, Kodo's calmness was a form of arrogance, a silent statement that he was above the fray, that he didn't need to prove himself as Ruta did. Ruta's frustration often manifested in bullying, his way of asserting dominance over the one person he couldn't outshine. He would taunt Kodo in front of their peers, challenge him to unnecessary sparring matches, and undermine him in group projects, hoping to provoke a reaction. But Kodo, true to his nature, remained composed, refusing to be drawn into confrontation. The bullying in Kodo's calm. The animosity between Ruta and Kodo came to a head one afternoon during a tactics class. The students were divided into groups to devise a strategy for an imagined military campaign. Kodo's group, which included Durika, had crafted a plan that impressed the instructor with its innovative use of limited resources. When it was Ruta's group's turn to present, he could barely contain his frustration at Kodo's success. After class, Ruta cornered Kodo in the hallway, his face flushed with anger. Durika, who had been walking with Kodo, took a step back, sensing the tension. "Think you're so clever, don't you, Kodo?" Ruta sneered, his voice low but filled with venom. "Always so calm, so collected. But you're nothing special. Just because you got lucky with a few ideas doesn't mean you're better than me." Kodo met Ruta's glare with his usual serene expression. "I don't think I'm better than anyone, Ruta. We all bring different strengths to the table." Ruta scoffed, his hands curling into fists. "Don't play coy with me, Kodo. You think you're above us all, don't you? Too good to get your hands dirty, too perfect to make a mistake." Kodo shook his head, keeping his voice level. "That's not true, and you know it. We're here to learn, to grow as leaders. Competing with each other is part of that, but it doesn't have to be personal." Ruta's eyes flashed with anger. "You can't fool me with that good guy act, Kodo. You think you can just waltz through life, untouchable, while the rest of us have to fight for every scrap of recognition." Kodo sighed, his patience wearing thin. "Ruta, if you want recognition, it won't come from tearing others down. We all have to work hard to earn our place here." Ruta's lips twisted into a bitter smile. "You're right about one thing, I'll work harder than anyone to make sure everyone knows who the best really is. And trust me, Kodo, it won't be you." Before Kodo could respond, Ruta turned and stormed off, leaving Kodo and Durika standing in the hallway. Kodo let out a slow breath, shaking his head. Durika, who had remained silent during the exchange, placed a gentle hand on Kodo's arm. "You handled that well, Kodo. It's not easy to stay calm in the face of such hostility." Kodo looked at her, offering a small smile. "It's not easy, but it's necessary. I've learned that reacting with anger only escalates things. Ruta is struggling with something deeper, and I don't want to add fuel to the fire." Durika nodded, admiration in her eyes. "You're a good person, Kodo. Not many people would be able to stay so composed." Kodo's smile widened, a warmth spreading through him at her words. "Thank you, Durika. That means a lot coming from you." The love between Kodo and Durika. As the days passed, the bond between Kodo and Durika grew stronger. Durika was the embodiment of grace and beauty, her presence a breath of fresh air in the often intense environment of Wereline University. She was admired by many for her intellect, her kindness, and her stunning beauty. Her long, flowing hair framed a face that could only be described as captivating, her eyes holding a depth that drew people in. Durika had an innate ability to make those around her feel at ease, her smile capable of brightening even the darkest of days. Many of the male students at Wereline, including Ruta, had admired Durika from afar, their hearts quickened by her presence. But Durika, while always polite and gracious, kept her distance, her focus on her studies and her own goals. It wasn't until she met Kodo that something shifted within her. There was a calmness about him, a quiet strength that intrigued her. Unlike others who tried to impress her with grand gestures or flattery, Kodo was different. He treated her as an equal, respecting her opinions and valuing her intelligence. Their conversations flowed effortlessly, whether they were discussing military strategy or the latest book they had read. One evening, as the sun set over the campus, casting a warm glow across the grounds, Kodo and Durika found themselves sitting by the lake, a favorite spot of theirs. Durika looked out over the water, her voice soft as she spoke. "Kodo, do you ever think about the future? About where all of this is leading?" Kodo turned his gaze to her, his expression thoughtful. "I do. I think about the responsibility that comes with the knowledge and skills we're gaining here. About the kind of leaders we'll become." Durika nodded, a small smile playing on her lips. "I think about that too. But I also think about life beyond Wereline. About the people we'll become outside of this place." Kodo's heart skipped a beat, sensing the deeper meaning behind her words. "I think about that too," he admitted. "And I think about the kind of life I want to build, the kind of person I want to share it with." Durika turned to him, her eyes searching his. "And what kind of person would that be?" Kodo hesitated for a moment, then decided to speak from the heart. "Someone who is kind, thoughtful, strong in spirit. Someone who understands the weight of leadership, but also the importance of compassion. Someone who challenges me to be better." Durika's smile widened, her eyes sparkling in the fading light. "I think you've just described yourself, Kodo." Kodo chuckled softly, his gaze locked with hers. "Maybe. But I see those qualities in you, too, Durika." For a moment, they simply looked at each other, the world around them fading away. In that moment, they both knew that something had shifted between them, something deep and undeniable. "I'm glad we met, Kodo," Durika said softly. "You've become very important to me." Kodo reached out, gently taking her hand in his. "And you to me, Durika. I don't know what the future holds, but I do know that I want you to be a part of it." Durika squeezed his hand, her heart swelling with emotion. "I feel the same way, Kodo." As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the lake in shadows, Kodo and Durika sat in silence, their hands entwined, both knowing that they had found something rare and precious in each other. Ruta's disappointment. Unbeknownst to them, Ruta had been watching from a distance, hidden among the trees. He had followed them to the lake, his heart pounding with a mixture of hope and fear. For years, Ruta had harbored feelings for Durika, feelings that had grown stronger with time. She was everything he had ever wanted: beautiful, intelligent, kind. He had dreamed of being with her, of making her his own. But Ruta's shyness, a stark contrast to his usual assertiveness, had always held him back. Despite his many successes in life, Ruta had never found the courage to confess his feelings to Durika. He had always believed that, in time, she would come to see him as the perfect match, that their shared status and brilliance would naturally bring them together. Seeing her now, with Kodo, shattered that belief. The way she looked at Kodo, the softness in her voice when she spoke to him, the way their hands had intertwined, Ruta felt a sharp pain in his chest, a pain that quickly turned to anger. How could she choose him over me? Ruta thought bitterly. What does he have that I don't? Ruta's heart ached as he watched them together, the realization that Durika loved Kodo and not him sinking in like a cold blade. The jealousy and resentment he had always felt toward Kodo now burned hotter, fueled by the bitterness of unrequited love. As Kodo and Durika stood to leave, Ruta turned away, his mind racing. The disappointment he felt was overwhelming, but it was quickly overshadowed by something darker, a seething hatred for the one who had taken what Ruta believed was rightfully his. "I won't let this go," Ruta muttered to himself, his fists clenched at his sides. "Kodo may have taken Durika from me, but I'll make sure he pays for it." The brewing storm. From that day on, Ruta's animosity toward Kodo deepened, fueled by his heartbreak and the belief that Kodo had stolen Durika from him. Ruta's bullying grew more intense, his taunts more vicious, as he sought to undermine Kodo at every turn. But Kodo, aware of the pain Ruta was feeling, continued to remain calm, refusing to engage in the cycle of hatred. Kodo's relationship with Durika blossomed, their love growing stronger with each passing day. They became inseparable, supporting each other through the challenges of Wereline and sharing dreams of a future together. Durika's presence in Kodo's life brought him a sense of peace and happiness that he had never known, and he cherished every moment they spent together. But Ruta's feelings of betrayal and anger were like a festering wound, poisoning his thoughts and driving him further down a path of darkness. He could not let go of the belief that Durika should have been his, that Kodo had somehow manipulated her affections. The more he dwelled on it, the more he convinced himself that Kodo had wronged him in the worst possible way. The tension between Kodo and Ruta did not go unnoticed by their peers and instructors at Wereline. Whispers of their rivalry spread through the campus, with many speculating about the cause of their animosity. Some saw Ruta's actions as the result of jealousy, while others believed that the two were simply destined to be enemies. But Durika, unaware of the full extent of Ruta's feelings for her, continued to focus on her studies and her relationship with Kodo. She had always admired Ruta for his intelligence and skill, but she had never seen him as anything more than a friend. Her heart belonged to Kodo, and she was determined to build a life with him. As the days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months, the situation at Wereline grew more tense. Ruta's resentment toward Kodo and Durika reached a boiling point, and it became clear that something would have to give. The confrontation. It was a crisp autumn day when the inevitable confrontation finally occurred. Kodo and Durika were walking through the gardens of Wereline, enjoying a rare moment of leisure when they were approached by Ruta. His expression was cold, his eyes burning with barely contained fury. "Kodo," Ruta called out, his voice sharp and commanding. Kodo turned to face him, sensing the hostility in Ruta's tone. "Ruta, what is it?" Ruta took a step closer, his gaze flicking to Durika before settling on Kodo. "We need to talk. Now." Durika looked between the two men, sensing the tension. "Ruta, what's going on?" But Ruta ignored her, his focus entirely on Kodo. "You think you've won, don't you? That you can just take whatever you want, no matter who it belongs to." Kodo frowned, confused by Ruta's words. "What are you talking about? Don't play dumb." Ruta snapped, his anger finally spilling over. "You know exactly what I'm talking about, Durika. She was supposed to be with me, but you stole her." Kodo's eyes widened in realization, understanding at last the depth of Ruta's feelings. "Ruta, I didn't steal anything. Durika isn't a prize to be won. She's a person with her own feelings and choices. Ruda's jaw clenched, his hands curling into fists. But she was supposed to be with me. We're the same, both of us destined for greatness. We belong together, not you and her. Durika, who had been listening in shock, finally spoke up. Ruda, I never knew you felt this way. But Kodo is right, I'm not something to be possessed. I chose to be with him because I love him. Ruda's expression twisted in pain and anger. You're making a mistake, Durika. He's not right for you. He's nothing compared to what I can offer. Kodo stepped forward, his voice firm but calm. Ruda, this isn't about you or me. It's about Durika and her happiness. And if you care about her at all, you'll respect her decision. For a moment, it seemed as though Ruda might lash out, his emotions a whirlwind of anger, jealousy, and heartbreak. But then, something in him seemed to break, the fire in his eyes dimming as he realized the truth of Kodo's words. With a final, bitter look at the couple, Ruda turned and walked away, his shoulders slumped in defeat. Durika watched him go, a mixture of sadness and relief in her heart. She had never wanted to hurt Ruda, but she couldn't deny her love for Kodo. Kodo gently took her hand, his touch reassuring. Are you okay? Durika nodded, though her heart was heavy. I never wanted it to come to this. I know, Kodo said softly. But sometimes, people get hurt. All we can do is try to be kind and understanding. Durika leaned into him, finding comfort in his presence. I'm just glad I have you. And I'm glad I have you, Kodo replied, wrapping his arm around her. We'll get through this together. As they walked away from the confrontation, hand in hand, both Kodo and Durika knew that their love had been tested, but it had emerged stronger than ever. Yet, in the back of Kodo's mind, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning, that Ruda's resentment would continue to fester, leading to consequences neither of them could foresee. And so, the seeds of enmity were sown, destined to grow into a storm that would test the bonds of love, friendship, and loyalty. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear: the rivalry between Kodo and Ruda would shape not only their lives, but the fate of the world they inhabited. The birth of a grudge. Ruda's days were consumed by a deep, burning hatred. The world had been his for the taking, or so he had always believed. He was the son of Major General Hurus, a man of immense power and influence, and he had been groomed from birth to surpass even his father's achievements. Ruda was used to getting what he wanted, and he had always wanted Durika. His love for her had blossomed from a childhood crush into a full-blown obsession. Durika, with her stunning beauty, kindness, and intelligence, was the embodiment of everything Ruda desired in a partner. But then Kodo had entered the picture. Kodo, the orphan boy with no name, no legacy, had somehow captured Durika's heart. To Ruda, this was not just a betrayal, it was an affront to everything he believed in. How could Durika choose Kodo over him? Ruda's anger festered, twisting into something dark and consuming. He could not sleep, his thoughts tormented by the image of Durika and Kodo together. The love he had for her, once pure, had been tainted by jealousy and bitterness. One morning, after another sleepless night, Ruda could bear it no longer. He sought out Kodo, determined to confront him. His steps were heavy with anger as he found Kodo practicing martial arts alone in a secluded courtyard of Wereline University. Kodo. Ruda's voice rang out, sharp and venomous. Kodo turned to face him, his expression calm as always. Ruda, he acknowledged with a nod, though he could see the fury in Ruda's eyes. Ruda wasted no time, his words cutting through the air like a blade. Durika means everything to me, he declared, his voice trembling with barely contained rage. Without her, I've almost lost it all. Kodo held Ruda's gaze, his own emotions carefully concealed. I feel the same, Kodo replied quietly, his voice steady despite the tension between them. I will love her until the end of time. Those words were like fuel to the fire in Ruda's heart. How dare Kodo speak of loving Durika, as if he had any right? Ruda's fists clenched at his sides, his nails digging into his palms as he struggled to maintain control. "I've heard of your prowess in martial arts and combat," Ruda spat, his tone dripping with bitterness. "I challenge you to a duel, barehanded, in secret. Let's fight to the death." Such challenges were not uncommon in their society, a brutal tradition that allowed men to settle their disputes with blood. It was a way of life in this world, where might often made right. Ruda fully expected Kodo to refuse, to back down and prove that he was not worthy of Durika. But Kodo surprised him. "I have no need to fight with you," Kodo said calmly, his voice as serene as ever. Ruda's fury escalated. "You are truly a bastard," he hissed. "A damn abandoned child. A coward. A man who lives under a woman's skirt." Kodo's expression remained impassive, but Ruda's insults struck a nerve deep within him. Memories of his painful childhood, of being an orphan with no family, resurfaced. Despite the turmoil churning inside him, Kodo remained composed, unwilling to let Ruda's words provoke him. But something shifted within Kodo. He knew that this confrontation would not end until he accepted the challenge. And so, he did. "I accept the challenge," Kodo said, his voice calm but resolute. "Where? What time?" A flicker of surprise crossed Ruda's face at Kodo's unexpected acceptance, but it was quickly replaced by satisfaction. "Tonight, after the final bell," Ruda said, his tone icy. "At the clearing, 3 kilometers from the school." Kodo nodded, and with that, the duel was set. The fight to the death. The final bell of the day rang, signaling the end of classes at Wereline University. The sun was setting, casting an orange glow across the sky as Kodo made his way to the designated meeting place. The air was thick with tension, and the path he walked seemed eerily quiet. This confrontation, born out of Ruda's twisted love and unrelenting hatred, was inevitable. Ruda was already there when Kodo arrived, pacing back and forth like a caged animal. His eyes were wild with anger, his body tense with anticipation. When he saw Kodo approaching, he stopped, his hands clenching and unclenching as he prepared himself for what was to come. "No weapons," Ruda said, his voice taut with emotion. "Just our fists. We end this here and now." Kodo nodded, his expression unreadable. "As you wish." For a moment, they stood facing each other, the silence between them heavy with unspoken words. Then, without warning, Ruda lunged at Kodo, his fists flying in a barrage of punches. He attacked with the ferocity of a man possessed, driven by a desperate need to prove himself. Kodo dodged the first few punches, stepping back with a grace that only further infuriated Ruda. Ruda's anger made him reckless, and he swung wildly, hoping to land a blow that would take Kodo down. But Kodo remained calm, his movements measured as he countered Ruda's aggression. For the first 5 minutes, Ruda held the advantage, his attacks relentless. He delivered 2 quick kicks, one aimed at Kodo's face, the other at his chest, but Kodo managed to evade them, stepping back just in time. Ruda followed up with a powerful punch, but Kodo dodged it, his body moving with a fluidity that belied the tension in the air. Kodo could see the patterns in Ruda's attacks, the anger that fueled his every move. He knew that Ruda's emotions were clouding his judgment, making him predictable. Slowly, Kodo began to shift from defense to offense. He bided his time, waiting for the right moment. Then, with lightning speed, Kodo delivered a devastating elbow strike aimed at Ruda's face. Ruda, caught off guard, barely had time to react. The force of the blow sent him reeling, blood trickling from his nose. But Ruda was quick to recover, and in retaliation, he landed a solid punch to Kodo's ribs, eliciting a grunt of pain. Both fighters were injured now, but neither was willing to back down. The fight continued, each blow landing with more force than the last. The sun had long since set, and the only sounds were the grunts of exertion and the thuds of fists meeting flesh. The ground beneath them was stained with blood, their bodies battered and bruised. They fought for what felt like hours, neither gaining the upper hand. Their stamina was waning, exhaustion threatening to take hold, but they pushed through the pain, driven by a primal need to prove themselves. Ruda's mind was a maelstrom of hatred and jealousy, while Kodo's thoughts remained focused, determined to end this fight without losing his life. But as the night wore on, it became clear that neither would emerge victorious. They were too evenly matched, their skills honed to near perfection. Every time one seemed to gain the advantage, the other would counter with equal force. Their movements became slower, more labored, as the toll of the fight began to show. Just as they were preparing to launch another round of attacks, a shadowy figure emerged from the darkness, a chimpanzee, its eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. The chimpanzee moved with uncanny speed and agility, leaping into the fray with a grace that took both Ruda and Kodo by surprise. Before either could react, the chimpanzee delivered two powerful kicks, one to Ruda, the other to Kodo, sending both men staggering backward. Despite the force of the blows, the chimpanzee's movements were precise, controlled, as if it had been watching and waiting for the perfect moment to intervene. "Enough," the chimpanzee shouted, its voice commanding and full of authority. "Do you two wish to fight to the death? Where is your future? Where are your ambitions?" Ruda and Kodo, both panting and bleeding, paused, their bodies tense with adrenaline. The chimpanzee's words cut through the haze of anger and pain, forcing them to confront the reality of their situation. Ruda, his chest heaving with exertion, felt a moment of clarity wash over him. He had been so consumed by his hatred for Kodo, his obsession with Durika, that he had lost sight of everything else, his dreams, his goals, his future. What was he fighting for? Was it really worth losing his life over a woman who had made her choice? Kodo, too, was struck by the chimpanzee's words. He thought of Durika, of the life they had envisioned together. If he died here, what would become of her? What would become of the life they had hoped to build? The chimpanzee continued, its voice calm but firm. If you wish to continue your battle, do so as warriors, not as enemies consumed by hatred. Fight with honor at MFC, Military Fighting Club. With that, the chimpanzee turned and disappeared into the shadows, leaving both men to ponder his words. The aftermath. The first confrontation between Ruda and Kodo had ended in a draw, both men too exhausted and injured to continue. As they stood there, bloodied and bruised, the reality of their situation began to sink in. This fight had not resolved anything, it had only deepened the wounds, both physical and emotional. Kodo, his breathing labored, took a step back. "This isn't over, Ruda," he said, his voice hoarse but determined. "But I won't let it end in death. If you want to settle this, we'll do it with honor." Ruda, still reeling from the intensity of the fight, nodded slowly. The hatred he had felt moments ago had not disappeared, but the chimpanzee's words had planted a seed of doubt. He realized that this path of vengeance would only lead to more pain, more loss. "Fine," Ruda muttered, wiping the blood from his mouth. "But don't think this means I've forgiven you. I'll fight you again, and next time, I'll win." Kodo met Ruda's gaze, a look of understanding passing between them. They were enemies, yes, but there was a strange sense of respect growing between them, a recognition of each other's strength and determination. As they turned to leave, each nursing their wounds, the tension between them remained palpable. The mysterious chimpanzee had given them a new path, one that would test their skills and their honor. The next time they faced each other, it would be in the arena of the MFC, where the stakes would be just as high, but the rules would be clear. For now, they would heal, both physically and mentally, and prepare for the battles yet to come. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear: the rivalry between Ruda and Kodo would not end with this fight. It had only just begun, and the consequences would ripple far beyond the two of them, shaping the fate of everyone they cared about. As they walked away from the battlefield, the weight of their unresolved conflict hung heavy in the air. The night was quiet, but in their hearts, the storm of emotions raged on, setting the stage for the next chapter in their intertwined destinies.